My guest today is Roger Gallagher. He's the founder and president of Gallagher Remodeling and a friend of mine that I met in business school. We went there together. Hi, Roger.
Hi, Adam. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for coming on today. So like we were talking before we started, I just want to talk more about your business, how it came together, how it affects your life, all the good stuff we were going over. But first, why don't we just talk about what it is that you do? What is Gallagher Remodeling? What makes you special, and what makes it a company?
Well, we're a design and remodeling company. So we package together both the design and the construction of residential remodeling projects primarily. So that's kitchens and baths and additions and that sort of stuff. And we've been doing that now for, I've had the company for 34 years, and we've been doing the work as a design build package for about 22 of those years. Yeah.
That was actually one of my first questions, because looking at all the pictures you've got going over here from your portfolio, everything's beautiful. And I know a challenge that a lot of people have, that I've had just in having things remodeled or working on that stuff, is the disconnect between the design and the build. So I was going to ask you how you handle that, and if you work with designers. So you guys do the design as well as the construction, so the homeowner can work with you from the idea all the way through?
Right. Yeah, that's the concept. We actually, as a company, outsource a lot of those resources, just like we would outsource plumbing or electrical. We outsource to a separate architectural firm and to a separate interior design firm to collaborate with the homeowners to figure out all those decisions on how things are going to look and what the layout's going to be. But we also are able to comment from a construction point of view on the technical end of things, and also price the actual work, so that, ultimately the goal is to get the design to function and look like it's supposed to, and get the budget to behave like it's supposed to, so that you get those things all in alignment, and include the homeowner's collaboration in all of those things. And it seems to be a really good formula for successful projects. So
are you then sort of project managing the design aspect of it and the architectural planning, and then you take it into production, so to speak, after it's done? Or is it hands off during the design, more of a consultation on the feasibility of the construction that's the design's taking place?
No, it's a highly managed process, from beginning to end. And so we set a schedule for design development. And once the client commits to us, we set a schedule for design development, which includes, the architect's work and the interior designer's work. Often there's engineering involved at that point. And there are other studies that we want to do up front, often to understand what's going on in the existing house. We can do an asbestos survey to look for hazardous materials. On a recent project, we were doing an air quality survey just to try to understand the existing conditions in the house and how we might be able to affect those with the solution that we provide for the design. Mm-hmm. So, it can be a pretty intensive upfront due diligence process to try to understand the project and what the client wants, and then to sort that out so that we can have a contract to actually do the construction. And the construction, of course, is also a highly managed process.
Yeah, I'm sure. So do you typically put the homeowners in touch with the designers and the architects? In other words, they hire you, or they come to you because they want a project done, and then you help to backwards architect that project through the designers and everybody? Or is it a little bit of both? Sometimes the architect will bring you in, sometimes the designer brings you in, sometimes you're bringing them in?
Most typically, the homeowner contacts our company, and one of the things we can offer is being sort of the one accountable source for everything. Mm-hmm. So, they say the buck stops here, at the at the president's desk and in our company, the way that it's structured, that's definitely the case. My role is also to serve as, project manager, production manager. So I wear a lot of hats, and ultimately, am responsible for managing all aspects of the project. And, to some homeowners, that's attractive, that there isn't, sort of a fragmented process. I mean, another way to do this is to hire an architect, have the architect draw you what you want with no idea of how much it's going to cost. And then you send that out for bid and you get a bunch of prices back that don't have anything to do with what you thought the price was going to be.
Right.
So then
they have to be inflated for safety's sake because they didn't work with you on the design, and they don't have, but probably have a lot of questions as the builder on what's going to have to happen. So if you're just looking for a price, then it's going to have to take oops into account, right?
Sure. Yeah, there are definitely contingencies that are added in. And, often what I found before we did design build, we'd get a design and it would have, products specified that were unusual or particularly expensive. And of course, we would just follow the plan and price those things out, and then meet with the homeowner to talk about the price, and they would be shocked at how expensive the price was. And I would say, well, you wanted this, really exotic hardwood, as a finish for your deck, or,
right,
whatever the case was. And they would say, I didn't ask for that. Like, it wasn't something I wanted. And so the community, like, you don't know what the communication is between other parties until you become part of it. And I just wasn't part of that conversation.
Yeah. I faced something fairly similar where I'm similar to you. Everything stops at my desk and I'm involved with all the projects. I don't like to be too hands off because I like to know what's going on. But in pricing the type of work that we do, similar. Sometimes people just come to the table and say, I want a website. What does it cost? Like, well, it's a loaded question. We got to talk about what it is you want from your website. What's a reality for your business? Because same as the person with the exotic hardwoods, we could build you a website for $10,000 or $250,000. What do you need the website to do? What kind of work has to go into that website for it to come to life, right? And if we don't define that ahead of time, then it's sort of a effort and futility for me to give you just a ballpark quote. So early in the business, I would always chase business, and I would, if someone wanted a quote, I thought that was like an open window. Great, we have a chance here. But now, if something doesn't have a fairly defined scope, or at least a wish list, and people have a balanced idea of what they want, then I can't give you a quote. I can't just run, for the hills hoping that it's all going to work out. We have to sit down. We have to talk. We have to bring your idea into a manageable spectrum and then talk about what it's actually going to take to make it happen. So it sounds like similarly, homeowners could get caught in the trap of just, I want this, but then they're $100,000 past what they could have possibly done, as opposed to you can help them actually plan for what they can do to their house and actually get it done. Yeah.
Well, we found it's really useful to talk about the money and the project together from the very beginning, right? Because if you don't know where you're going with either one of those, then who knows where you'll end up, and it may be someplace where you're not happy. So one thing we find useful is to sort of base project budgets on, sort of a baseline, like, in recent experience with projects like what you've described to me, the baseline might be about X. And as I told someone the other day, the sky's the limit, sort of above and beyond that. And, as a business owner, sometimes you learn that the hard way when somebody says, oh, I'm going to want some really expensive stuff. And you say, yeah, how expensive could it be? Mm-hmm. And then you find out like what they really want is really above and beyond what you could have imagined someone would spend on a project or would want to invest in their home. And, sometimes when they really get through the process of discovery and find out, what it's really going to cost, sometimes those projects go south and don't happen.
Yeah.
But sometimes, you're surprised at what people want for their quality of life and to invest in their home, and they decide to go for it anyway. And so it's you sort of never know where it's going to go, the design development process, and it is an evolution, and people have ideas along the way. And usually when you look back at where you end up from where you started, it's definitely a journey.
I'm sure it is. And it's mostly interior remodels that you guys do? Or additions and remodels, is that right?
Yeah. And we tend to bring more value, I think, to the more complicated projects. And so those are kitchens and baths and additions and projects that involve a lot of different trade disciplines and the coordination of a lot of different materials and installations. As opposed to something like an exterior project where you're, stripping and replacing a roof, or single trade projects like somebody wants an air conditioning system. In some cases, those involve a number of trades, and people know that we'll have a team put together that will do a good job on that project. And so they want to go to a general contractor and work with our resources, and they're happy to pay for that and support the company. Maybe they're a past client and they've worked with us before, and they appreciate the processes and procedures that we bring to the whole thing. But,
reliability, probably.
Yeah. And knowing that there's some oversight, because in this area particularly, you have a lot of, working professionals that are also busy parents and raising families, and people who just, want to spend their time either on their profession or raising their family and doing things other than trying to manage a project, which, they may or may not have done once or twice, at other times in their lives, but really don't know that much about it. I know it's a full-time job for me. So, you can imagine if you've never done it, how much work it is.
And just looking at the pictures here and just your website and knowing you in the past, it looks like high-end finishes and beautiful work and really well designed. That was why I had the first question about how you work with design to get it done, because everything looks like it goes together. But I imagine with that comes sort of the careful planning that you're alluding to, and also probably a careful building of a team, right? You can't just grab anyone and then end up with a beautiful finished project. You need to have people that are skilled in what they're doing and understand the level of finish. I mean, it seems like it might. How's it been over the years to develop a crew that you can rely on, that that you're going to end up with the results that we see here in these photos?
Well, that's been one of the big challenges, I think, along the way. Diving into design build, all of a sudden we needed, in 1996, we needed a lot of resources that we didn't have available to us before, that we didn't need before. And then how we approach that has evolved. I think it was maybe 10 or 12 years after we started doing design build, we did a whole house remodel project with a client where we, literally stripped everything off the outside of the house and out of the inside of the house and dug the basement down a foot and put everything all new in the house. And it was just a property where we couldn't build new. And so the existing structure needed to be remodeled inside and out. And at the time, we weren't working with an interior designer, and so the homeowner was just going out and picking things that they wanted, which sounds like a reasonable thing to expect, but the reality of it now is there's so many choices, so many products, so many manufacturers that people really get confused, and they also don't necessarily have any expertise or training in how all the parts fit together into some cohesive whole. And so when we went through that project with them, we offered a lot of assistance that way, but we decided that we really needed to work with someone who was trained and professional, really in that interior design aspect, and bring that as part of our service, so that, it was a complete service, and that we could get actually better results for our clients that way. So you sort of discover resources that you need, and then there's the trial and error process of putting a team together to actually work on the projects. And companies change over time.
Yeah, for sure.
You come to rely on this great plumbing company, and then personnel changes, and all of a sudden you find you can no longer rely on them. So then it's time to find a new plumber, and you're sort of back to square one in the plumbing department for trying people out and trying to get referrals and references for who you might replace them with on the team. It's good to have an A team and a B team, but we tend to just sort of have an A team and people that we go to time and again, who understand what we want on a project and are sort of bought into our approach, and they know they'll get repeat business from us as long as they hold up their end.
Yeah.
And we sort of have that same approach with distributors too. We're very loyal to our distributors as long as they continue to do a good job. And it's not like things don't come up, but how that they get resolved and how they get resolved, is important to the relationship. And so it's really a relationship-based approach to the whole thing. And, we're not shopping all of our trades for the absolute lowest price, because we know we can always find a lower price. It's just if the plumber doesn't show up in the middle of the project and do his job and get inspected and get out of the way, it can wreak havoc on your schedule. And when you're doing 4 or 5 projects at once on a schedule that everybody's, the different aspects of it all sort of have to dovetail, it can spiral out of control pretty quickly.
Yeah, for sure.
If you can't, sort of rely on people getting things done within a reasonable amount of time.
Yeah, that money you save with the plumber is lost when the project spirals out of control. To a huge factor. So, do you have a crew, like a core crew, or is like the Avengers, where you're assembling the right people for each project as they come to be? And you said you're running like 3 to 5 projects at once.
Yeah, so we have some people who work directly for the company. Right now that's four people, and we have supervisors who are, trained to manage projects and manage clients, frankly.
And those are the people on site that are managing the ongoing work as it comes together.
Right, on site every day. They're also, licensed construction supervisors and carpenters, and so they can do, some framing work and some finished carpentry work and hang cabinetry and stuff like that. But they also know what the trades installations should look like. They have all the information about the materials and the installations, so they can oversee that those get done, set up and executed properly. But they work directly for us. And then there's a couple people we have who support them, who are also employees. And then, we have some other resources we can bring to bear in that same capacity, sort of as a supervisor, carpenter, overseer on a maybe smaller, less complicated project when we need more capacity. One that comes to mind was a former employee who moved a ways away, and so he decided he wanted to do this on his own. And so as an independent, we've been able to, get an agreement with him to be a separate contractor, and he'll come in and do a limited project like a kitchen or a bath or something when we need more help. And, it's good because
you can rely on him because you know the kind of work you're going to get.
There's some continuity there because he has worked for us, and he knows what we expect, and he knows what he needs to do to hold up his end without a lot of explanation.
Yeah. And I mean, it seems like you said you've been in business 34 years and you've found your niche, and you're doing these beautiful remodels, which are fairly large projects, I'm guessing, because the rooms don't look like that when you start, right? It's not, for the most part, it's not just doing that island, but it's the whole room as you see it come together.
Oh yeah, the before and afters are pretty impressive contrasts.
But that is a certain level of project in your world of general contracting, right? So 34 years ago, you probably wasn't that, right? There was probably a place that you had to start. What was it like in the beginning of the company? What type of work were you doing that led you to where you are today?
Well, yeah, it was sort of catch as catch can in the beginning. It
always is, right? I mean, that's the way it works.
I guess. I mean, nobody knows about you, and you haven't figured out really what you're doing. So, the company started as a partnership. It was just me and one other guy who had been working for another company. And really, we went into business for ourselves because the company we were working for, really had some challenges and struggles that, sort of reached the point where we didn't want to be associated with the company anymore. Mm-hmm. And so we said, we can do this better than these guys. So we went off on our own. It was a big year for me, actually, because I started the business with my partner. I got married and I bought a truck. It was heady times.
It's funny how often that comes up when I talk to people about getting married, starting the business, all sort of big life events that, if you had your ideal planning, you'd schedule one at a time, but it rarely works that way.
Right. I should have had a baby and moved, and then it really would have been a complete year.
Yeah.
And so we just, my partner grew up somewhat locally, so he knew some people locally, so he would find some work and I would find some work, and we were advertising in the newspapers. But a lot of the projects were repair work and, sort of whatever we could find. We'd get the occasional kitchen or bathroom, and, we knew some people who would do some of the plumbing and electrical work, and we, just found some resources and made it happen. But he and I both were working in the field. I mean, I came into this business from the trade end of things, where I started out as a carpenter myself, mm-hmm. and in going into business for myself, needed to become licensed. And so that's when I learned the building codes around the construction. And so I didn't have a family at that time. And so, we'd work all day, and then at night we'd, call people back and do the estimates and the paperwork and the administration. And, I actually didn't mind working all day and then working until 9 o'clock at night, punching stuff out on my dot matrix printer with my, computer. It was a newfangled device then, before the internet really was readily available to anybody. And it helped that my wife also was working professionally, so that, we knew that all our eggs weren't in one basket, mm-hmm. In the success or failure of my company. And so, that was 1986. And in 1989, we sort of slammed into the savings and loan debacle, which caused an economic downturn. And so it's just interesting to sort of see how we were going to navigate that. And I have to give a lot of credit to the clientele that we had developed over 3 years, because I felt like they sort of saved us by reaching out and having us do some additional work and sort of keeping us going.
That's good. When it was harder to find new work, you could have some of that fall back because you had done a good job.
Yeah. And so that was, that's always been our stock and trade, I guess, is, reputation. Doing good work will always lead to repeat work.
Yeah, it always does. Just do a good job, and then you get paid rewards from that. But when the downturn happened, how did that hit you guys? Was it just a dry up of new work? What did you learn from that?
Yeah, the new work dried up quite a bit. That wasn't as bad of a impact as either the burst of the tech bubble, or 2000, 2001, or the housing crisis of 2008.
Yeah, I want to talk about both of those.
Yeah, I'm a survivor, but I mean, we did notice a little downturn in that we had to struggle a little bit harder. In 1991, my first child was born, my oldest son, and since business was a little slow for me, I became Mr. Mom, and my wife worked hard to accelerate her professional career. She had gone and gotten a master's degree, and so she was at a higher pay grade than me. And having my own business afforded me the lifestyle consideration of being able to...
The flexibility to make it work. Yeah. That's nice.
Yeah. And then, interestingly enough, 5 or 6 years later, when things were changing at her place of employment and her department was getting reorganized and she needed an exit out the door, my company had grown to the point where I could say, okay, well, you can come work part-time for me and I'll carry the load and you can figure out what your next steps will be.
Sure.
And, actually her next steps were to stay at home for the next 10 years or so and raise our boys and make sure they were squared away in the school system and all of that. And she did a lot of volunteering too in the community. So unpaid work. Yeah.
Work nonetheless.
Yes, indeed.
That's a nice thing that I've found throughout my whole career too, is having the business. It can come with some handcuffs, but it can also come with a lot of freedom to do things as they pop up in life, like a downturn leading to you or your wife pursuing something else and you staying at home with the kids. But the business doesn't have to die with that, because you can be agile. You can work at odd hours to get caught up on the quoting or the callbacks, and you can sort of make it work. Where if you had to punch a clock 9 to 5 and be at a certain place, for a certain set of time, then it wouldn't have worked. You couldn't have done it. You couldn't have pulled that off. You would have had to find a new job or do whatever, and you wouldn't be here today, because it can't evolve. It's not always, I write my business plan, I'm opening the door, starting the business, and then you go forward. Sometimes there's bad times. Sometimes there's great times. Sometimes there's just getting it done and making it through. And you've been through 3 of those bad times now that you can't have not been impacted, right? Especially the housing bubble. Was that the worst one?
Well, we were definitely impacted, and the housing bubble, yes, 2008 was by far and away the worst. And I just remember after the Goldman Sachs fallout, I don't think our phone rang for about 4 months. And I mean, literally, it did not ring. There wasn't anybody trying to sell me anything. There wasn't anybody asking to buy anything. And I just remember this crushing silence in the office where, the phone used to ring, many, many times a day, and just nothing was happening. And having weathered a couple storms prior, as I mentioned, I sort of felt like this too shall pass, but it took a long time.
It did.
Long after the economists were saying the recession had passed, we were still suffering the fallout. But I remember it being the same way kind of when we came out of the savings and loan crisis, that the newspapers were saying one thing and we started to see something a little bit different. And it was sort of like, all right, the analysis and the reality are not always in sync. And also, I think, you tend to read about national trends, and yet with a small business, you're dealing with a lot of really local conditions.
Yeah. I remember that exact scenario. I mean, I remember hearing regularly about how it was over, or the things were healing, everything was getting better. And I was not hearing that from anybody, including my business, and, having luck with new sales or any kind of growth, that we were struggling, and it hurt us. Like you said, no one's selling anything, no one's buying anything. It was kind of an unfortunate break. But yeah, I remember thinking the same thing. Like, where's all the healing? I don't see it happening.
Yeah, there were some pretty serious wounds. But I want to back up a little bit to, to go to the beginning where I was working in the field. early on, there was a window distributor who wanted to begin selling installed sales. And so they wanted to have good contractors, reliable contractors, professional contractors to do that work for them, so that probably to limit their exposure to liability and to make the new program implementation go smoothly. So they brought in an industry consultant to speak to a classroom full of contractors that they had chosen, probably by their accounts payable and accounts receivable record. And it was sort of the first education I had on business, being in business. And he came in and was just talking about, how a business operates. And sort of a light bulb went off in my head at that point, where I realized, we needed to get on top of this business thing. My partner really wanted to just stay working in the field. The two of us, it was a lot of fun, and he loved that, but I could sort of now had a different vision for where things were going to go. And shortly after, so I started to try to educate myself more, because I really loved the education that I got from that seminar. Ultimately the dealer installed program didn't go very far. They decided they really didn't want to be in that business, but it lit a fire under me. And shortly after that, I read Michael Gerber's E-Myth. And it's a very simple concept, really, that he's trying to relate in that book. But, he basically says that, no matter what business you're in, you're really in the you're not in the business of doing what your business does. You're in the business of being in business. And it's a basic, simple concept, right?
Takes a while to get it, though.
Yeah, because, we thought we were carpenters and remodelers and not business people. And really, if you're going to run a business and be a business person, then you have to know about business. And all businesses on one level or another are really just trying to accomplish the same thing, provide great customer service and, put together programs that are effective and ultimately profitable for whatever the profit goals are for the company. So
otherwise it's not a business.
Not for very long. right. And that's what happens actually a lot in this industry is, I think the failure rate for contractors is like 1 in 10 in the first year and 8 in 10 in the first 5 years. I mean, people don't survive very long.
I think, do you think a lot of that is because they don't have the epiphany you had about the business, and they're more stitching together day by day, project by project, instead of having a bigger picture of to what they want to accomplish, so that they're more living in the now in the project as opposed to pre-planning and being able to weather storms and get through things. Even if that storm isn't an economic collapse or a housing bubble downturn, even if it's just a couple months of bad sales, if you don't have anything, sometimes that's enough to take the business out.
Oh yeah, I definitely think that that's it. And I think, I took to the business part and I loved that part, and I love that part to this day of like setting goals and then measuring against, how you're doing against your goals, whether they are customer service goals or profitability goals. And I think a lot of people, that's not why they're, to use this same example, that's not why they're in the trades. They like to make things with their hands. And, I do too, but I just picked a different focus. And, but I think that failure rate can definitely be attributed to the fact that people don't understand that they're running a business and that they need to pay attention to certain things. A lot of people don't want to pay attention to those things.
Yeah. Like paying attention to being there 3 months later and having a good relationship with the person you just did some work for. That's, I think, probably early on, if we go back to, not the work that you're doing today, but when you're first putting the business together and you're doing the work yourself and you're taking a job here, a job there, fix this, fix that, remodel this. I mean, you didn't start out as a design and remodeling firm like you are today, right? You started out doing project work and, I'm assuming, but handy stuff, project work, fixing things. And there's a lot in your industry where people do that work claiming they can do that work, and they'll come in and get paid and just do the least possible, sometimes not do the work at all. But then there's the people who come in and do the work. And we were talking before we started recording that I have a similar problem in my industry in marketing, because people get burned all the time by people that don't actually know how to do what they're promising to do. Where in your case, it happens a lot as well. So you have to put in a few years, I'm assuming, of being reliable, of being the person who does good work regularly and reliably, whether or not there's an easy out. You don't take the easy out and you do the right thing. And then after a few years, you start to have people that refer you and trust you, because I mean, I know with contractors too, when I do come across a good one and work with a good one, you want to hold tight to that and refer work to them, because you want them to stay in business. You want them to be there because you can trust them.
Yeah, absolutely. It does take a while to build a reputation. And, I mean, I remember starting out in business and being nervous about, am I actually going to be capable of doing this project? And do I have the resources? And do I have the knowledge? I remember reading books and books and books on just the trades itself and how projects are put together, because I needed to educate myself to have the confidence to go out and say, yes, we can do this and we can do it right. And then, having a high level of accountability. I mean, if you look at things from the client's perspective, that's really what they want is someone they can trust, and someone that will show up reliably, keep a project on schedule and do what they say. And, it sounds simple, but it's not necessarily easy. It takes a lot of planning and a lot of oversight and a lot of persistence to sort of keep a thing on target.
Well, I think part of it's got to go back to what you said about having your epiphany and treating it like a business, where eventually something has to click, where every job you're bidding or every client you're looking at a future referral. You're looking at starting and completing a project and having it be something that you can point to as, I'm good at this, you should hire us because of this. Where there's also a lot of people who they want the down payment. Maybe they'll start the work and then they disappear, or they realize they couldn't do the project, but they didn't tell you that ahead of time. So they disappear, or they tell you halfway through, well, it's going to cost 4 times what I said because I didn't understand what it was that we were doing. There's a very different way of looking at it, where it's no one's fault, or it's the homeowner's fault, or you as a business have to carefully pre-plan for these things and do it because you want the outcome. You want the down the road. And I think that's got to be a differentiator in your line of work, is who's thinking about down the road and who's thinking right now.
Yeah, it's one differentiator. And, I talked about that first experience of being educated in business. And I realized that it's, I certainly can't claim to have done this by myself. I mean, I have had a ton of help along the way, and I've sought a lot of help along the way, and really in trying to improve our service, have just undertaken a lot of educational opportunities sort of at every turn wherever I could. And so as I started to focus on the business, I worked with a designer who really was passionate about design build, and taught me a lot about how to operate that way. And the win for him was to have another contractor to execute his projects. Mm-hmm. Excuse me. After that, I took an intensive 3-year course in sales training, and it talks about just what you were talking about, where really your best business is going to come, at least in our industry, from repeat and referral work. And you almost start at the beginning with the fact that, yes, I want to do a great job for you people, so that at the end of the job, you have nice things to say about us and you tell all your friends, and we're going to ask you to tell your friends at the end of the job. And it's kind of funny because I remember not remembering to ask at the end of the job and having clients remind me that I'm supposed to ask and that they have somebody in mind. And so, yeah, I mean, if you start with the end in mind at the beginning, even if you don't remember where you're going, sometimes people will remind you.
Yeah.
And we also were lucky to participate. And again, all these things cost money. It was an investment in our future and the future of the company. But we participated in a remodelers peer review group that pulled together a bunch of non-competing remodeling companies from around the country of similar size with similar issues. And we would all, on a rotating basis, visit each other's offices and look at each other's books and come up with improvement plans, process improvement, and in some cases, personal improvement plans for each other's companies, and write down goals and prioritize the goals, and then meet 6 months later to assess how we were doing on those goals and what help we could offer each other. So that was tremendously helpful.
That's pretty great. You got to be ready to put your ego out of the way, though, huh? I mean, to not only to trust, but then to take that feedback of you built this baby, and then someone's going to come in and constructively, of course, but tell you what's wrong with it and how to fix it.
Well, it's interesting how resistant people are initially to that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I remember one contractor showed up and he had, we said, "How do you do your estimates?" And he pulled out a yellow pad and a pencil, and he said, "This is how I do this." And, at that point, everybody was using a computer. And so we said, "Well, you might be changing that." And he was like, "No, I don't think I'm going to change that." But it changed. So I was trying to grow the company at that point because it just was a goal to see if we could do that. It was sort of after the tech bubble recovery, and we grew the company to about 10 people and probably doing 4 times the revenue we had done maybe 5 years before. And fortunately, because we now knew how to monitor the business and measure what was happening, we could see in 2007 that we weren't really going to have the business that we needed to sustain that model. And so after building the company up over the course of about 6 years, we started to dismantle it a little bit, cut it in half, restructured things a little bit. And then in 2008, we had another round of that as things collapsed, and we sort of had to hunker down and duck and cover and hibernate for a few years to get through that. So we were down to a really small skeleton crew, and but every bad thing that happens also gives you some kind of opportunity. And so there was a lot of available labor looking for work at that point. And so we were able to outsource a lot of stuff. And, it was at the same time that I decided to go to Babson and get a master's in business. Just, I had a lot of reasons for doing that, but one of them was to make sure I wasn't missing anything and to try to understand, how to operate in this new environment. I also wanted to meet new and exciting people like yourself and some of the other people we worked with through that class.
It was a great program.
It was a great program, and it gave me, a very different perspective on what I do, and I was able to learn about a lot of other industries and what a lot of other people do, and it just, by looking at that, gave me sort of a completely different perspective on what I'm doing and how and why. And
me too. It helped me a lot to deconstruct problems or issues too, to be able to think about them in a different way, sort of from outside, where you could be more in control of, breaking something apart and creating a solution, as opposed to being reactive or following. I don't want to say instinct. That's not what I mean, but it sort of helped me to separate myself from the business and look at it as business issues where before that I was always very, very, personally and closely tied to it. But I wanted to ask you, you sound really open to change and to learning and always seeking it out. Was that always the case? Like when you started the business, were you that way, or is that something you grew into?
Well, I think, I think I have to credit my parents for that, really. I mean, my mother was a teacher, and I grew up, I think, in an environment where, and my grandmother used to say, well, you learn something new every day. And I think, that's sort of how I've always lived. And my mother, as an example, she retired from being a science teacher at age 65 and decided she wanted to learn to become a percussionist. And so
nice.
Yeah, she's about to turn 86, and she still plays with the American Legion band in her town. So she did that successfully, and I think she's always sort of had the mantra of, it's never too soon to start, and it's never too late to change. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I've been fortunate to, to be exposed to different great educational opportunities, both early in life and later in life. And so, yeah, I'm a big proponent of that. And I don't think I ever necessarily want to stop learning. Although I tend to, I don't go out on any big limbs, and a lot of my reading has always been industry related, or my wife criticizes me for not reading enough great literature and or even terrible fiction, but I tend to be more of a popular mechanic.
I get the same critique from my wife. Like, why don't you read something for fun? This is fun for me. I'm enjoying it.
Yeah. No, I get that. But I feel like there's always opportunities. And, now, I've been doing it for a long time. I have hopefully learned a few things. And so I've been doing a lot more teaching lately, and trying to give back. Another great resource for my business and myself personally has been the fact that there is a local chapter of a national association for the remodeling industry. And so that's a bunch of, remodeling contractors and affiliated businesses, whether they be trades or insurance people or legal people, materials distributors. But that's been a great resource for me to find help and get support. And so they recently started a mentorship program, and so I'm one of the mentors in that program. Just
that's cool.
Trying to give back to the industry.
So what are you mentoring? New people coming up, new GCs, or anybody that's trying to start a business in the industry?
Some of the younger members of the association that are trying to figure it out. It's about a half a dozen business owners who are mentoring another half a dozen up and coming businesses. And so we've been just been trying to talk about what we've done and what their issues are. And we have sort of a structured program to go through, touch on the various pieces, the finance, the business planning, the marketing, the organizational structure, that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And just help these guys sort of take a leap forward.
That's awesome. It's got to feel good, but at the same time, it's good for you. I think that you never know anything as well as when you teach it, because you can actually look at the subject from another angle. You have to figure out not only how do I do it, but how can I explain it to this person so that they'll understand it. And every time I'm faced with that, I get a deeper understanding myself of what the hell I was talking about. But I wasn't blessed.
It's also interesting because I don't want it to be a do as I say, not as I do situation. And so as we are, sort of foisting all of this work and introspection on these other companies, it's sort of like, I could benefit from doing that myself. So I'm just going to do it right alongside them. Mm-hmm. And, it's the second year that it's happened now. And so it's giving me sort of a forced annual renewal and review program, which maybe I was doing less consistently before that.
That's another example of you being willing to change, though, and looking for opportunities to learn and get better. I think that's awesome because it's key. But I can't pretend that I was as smart as you. I didn't always. I had to grow into that. When I started my business, it was 19 years ago, and it was more hard charging. And I thought I knew the answers to pretty much most questions. It was I don't know, typical type A drive forward. And it took me some of the ups and downs. It took me some of the, economically or with the company, and it took some lessons and some lumps before I started to let that part of me die and look to educate or become our partner or just grow. And now I that's my favorite stuff. I embrace it all, but it took me a while to grow into it. I wasn't as enlightened as you in the early days. I was more of an ass.
Well, maybe you came from a place of knowledge in the beginning, and I came from a place of ignorance and just needed more help early on.
I think it was more just combination of being driven and having an ego, being young. And I think that for me, ego started to die the older I got. And I don't mean go away like not having confidence, but I mean the ego part, the thinking what's best. That died over or started to at least sit in the back, as the older I got, and the more I had seen and the more I had been through, and the more bad times that you turn good through just clutching at things or working hard or figuring out new answers, where it's, my business is different than it was 19 years ago. It started out as an ad agency making TV commercials for small business, where we don't really make TV commercials anymore because that's not really a thing anymore. And before that, we were a record label and making music videos, but then it turned into the ad agency, and then it morphed into, really just digital and web and all of that. And then to where it is today, where we do web properties and apps and websites, but we produce podcasts and videos and all kinds of stuff in the digital world. So I'm always having to relearn and not know what's next. And that was one of those things I had to come to grips with, that I don't have all the answers, and I'm not going to. I just have to be okay with exploring the path, which took me a while to mature into that.
Yeah, I remember that being one of the things that was emphasized, one of the teachings that was emphasized at Babson was that things do not stay the same. And
at all.
You have to be prepared for things to change. And to the extent that you can anticipate how they're going to change and how you might respond to that, will keep you ahead of the game and be an advantage. But yeah, you definitely can't stand still. No,
it's funny because that's come up with every single person I've talked to, regardless of the type of business or how long they've been in business, was that change is the one thing for sure that you're going to have to deal with, and you don't always get to govern the change. You get to react to it sometimes.
Rarely.
Yeah,
yes.
But it's always new. It's not, even when you start to look at business education, much of it starts with a business plan and setting your 5-year goals and all of that. And I think it paints the picture, at least in the beginning, that you plan something out, you set the goals, and then that's just the way it goes. And that's almost never the case. It's you start, and then once you're actually in business, that's when things start to change, and you start to actually figure out what you might be doing next year, because it's going to change.
Well, everything in life is a wild ass guess, right? Mm-hmm. You think you have a vision for yourself or your company or how things are going to go, and you never know if things are going to go that way. I mean, fortunately, I guess depending on your circumstances, but things have a way of sort of going the way you want if you go after them.
Yeah, if you work for them.
Yeah. Sometimes they fall into place if you're lucky. But really, there's no guarantees in anything. And you can lay out a great plan and something like 2008 can happen. And it doesn't matter what your plan was. And I mean, in fact, as a small business owner, we find that, we're really subjected to the whims and arrows of outrageous folly of external forces, where you really don't have any control over even how much work you have. And that, some years you may have a ton of work, and it's not because you did a bunch of marketing. It's just because that much work happened to come in.
Yeah.
And then, everybody around you is doing great, and you don't have that much going on because, well, you didn't get those 2 or 3 projects, that you got the year before. And you're just sort of wondering, what it is personally that you're doing wrong. And it really doesn't have that much to do with it. It doesn't mean that you don't have any control or you can't influence it. In fact, that's one of the best things about being in business for yourself, is that you can't get fired. And if things, you can go out of business, you can run out of cash, but you can't get fired. And if things aren't going your way, then you can always ask the question of, what do I need to do to compensate? Or how do I try to course correct? And
you can change now.
Yeah.
You don't have to put a process in place to review it in 6 months to one day make this shift. You can just change right now. When you realize what's happening, you can make that decision. That's helpful.
In small business, it doesn't even take a committee. You can just say,
thank goodness,
I am going to do this tomorrow, and you can make it happen. Yeah.
So then 34 years ago, you start the business and you get married at the same time. And
bought a truck.
I forgot about that part. That's an important one. And then, things progress. How long does it take you until you start to become a design and remodeling firm? Or at least how long does it take to get to the next phase of the business, where I assume then you're having kids, I assume you want to spend a little bit more time at home, or at least in the certain hours, to be with the family as opposed to being at work. And how does the business evolve as your life changes?
Well, for me, and I don't know if this is just coincidence, but it seems like it's sort of been like 5-year increments, sort of roughly speaking. Started out working actually in the trade itself, and did that for about 5 years, and then started sort of working on the business when I got a little bit of that business education. And then we committed to differentiate ourselves by doing design build. And that was a way of sort of separating us from the pack and providing a more complete service. So in some respects, responding to wanting to make the business special, but also responding to what I was hearing from clients. In fact, I think I was directly asked by a client in 1995, why can't you just design this for us and then make it? And, a year later, we plunged into design build, just responding to that client request. And so 10 years after I started the business in 1996, I had now 2 kids, and I was Mr. Mom, and my wife was still working in her career. And so I needed to set some boundaries for my clients, because if you don't set boundaries for them, then they'll set your boundaries for you. And there are no boundaries at that point. So, I started limiting, my appointment windows. And I think actually it helped to make us appear like a more professional business, because we wouldn't meet people in their homes at, after dinner at night when they're trying to get their kids to bed or whatever it is. And so we would limit our time to business hours and try to get clients to, if they really struggled to find a time, they could put an appointment with us, with a doctor's appointment or something like that. But just out of necessity, I needed to, limit how much I was working sort of outside of business hours, because we're trying to raise a family.
Right.
And
how much were you working while you're Mr. Mom?
Well, it was full time as long as we had the work. I do remember there was a year in there when I did a lot of early spring fishing locally because we didn't have much going on.
Not a bad year, just maybe not financially the way you wanted it to go.
It's a bad year for fishing. But yeah, so but I was working, full time 5 days a week, and our kids were in daycare and or attending public school, and but I was trying to limit the weekend stuff and the evening stuff so that I would have family time, because that was important to me. And, my dad was a workaholic and wasn't around a lot, and I swore that I wouldn't be like him. Mm-hmm. I guess I have a little different perspective on that, at this point. But at the time, I was like sort of rebelling against my father, and I wasn't going to do that thing. And then, so my wife came and worked in my company, and she's a marketing person. And so she instituted, together we instituted a marketing program for the company, redesigned the logo, branded the whole thing, and put that out there. And that was a big step for us in terms of our outward facing professionalism. Mm-hmm. And, she worked in the company for a number of years, and then decided that she really needed to be home to give our boys the attention they needed. And I'd grown the company to the point where we could do that and rely solely on the income from the business. So we stuck with that for quite a while until we got the kids sort of to where they were comfortable on their own, and then she went back to working.
So you sort of flip spots after the 5 years. Then was it weird to get used to? Were you like going back to an office and sort of, how do you screw your head on differently going from balancing the dad and working to now it's my focus on the working, and then I'll be dad because she's going to pick up some of the slack that you were doing?
Yeah, it went pretty fluidly. And I mean, I guess we did have the period of transition, because when she was working for my company, she had more time to be at home. And, that was primarily why she left her professional career at that time, was to be at home. And it's like, okay, well, I'm getting pretty busy at work to be doing the Mr. Mom thing well. So, I sort of had a vision for the company, and the company seemed to be following that vision to grow. And so that's sort of when I dove in head first, and she actually bowed out of the company completely to be full-time at home. So I knew that part was covered. Mm-hmm. And we hired somebody to replace her administrative duties and so forth. And
it's no small thing to know that the home is covered. It's, my wife stayed home for the first 10 years with the kids too. And it's a lot of work. I mean, and to try and put the pieces together if you're both working, I hats off to people that making that work, because it's hard. It's especially if you have busy kids, which everybody does. As they grow and they have things that they have to do in addition to going to school, man, it's tough.
Yeah, it is. But it's also, the most important thing.
100%.
Yeah. And it's not always easy for kids to navigate the system, and every kid is different. And we just found very quickly that we needed to really put a lot of attention there, and it was worth it to us to do that. As opposed, we gave up one income, and so there were sacrifices there, but ones that we wanted to make.
Yeah, we were the same, and I even do the same with my business, where I have the luxury of my own schedule, right? And there's a balance of getting work done and making sure everything's taken care of. But I have the luxury of, it doesn't have to be at a certain time. So I'm the dad that's at all the practices, all the events, all the stuff. I play with the kids because I feel really lucky that I had the realization early on that that's not time I'm going to ever get to do again. And I enjoy it. I want to hang out with them while they're kids and be around. And so I organize the business around it, in the last 10 years of making sure that as it continues to grow and move forward, it doesn't have to take over or monopolize time.
Right. And I was able to do that same thing, and I, came to really value it. So, now I have some people working for me who are a little bit younger and in that same position. And I'm, they say, can I go to my kid's basketball game this afternoon? I got to leave a little early. And it's like, yeah, you have to go to that. Like, get out of here. We'll figure out, we'll figure out the 40 hours later. But I get the importance of that. And, that's a whole nother aspect of this that I've had to learn. As a small business owner, you end up, wearing so many hats and needing to know so much about so many different things. And there's the whole human resources aspect of
it's the human aspect.
Growing a company. I call it babysitting, right? Because everybody's different and everybody has different needs and come from different places. And all of that needs to be sort of standardized and managed and, in the kind of environment and culture you want to create in your company. And so, that's just a whole nother area where I received an education, sometimes the hard way.
Yeah, for sure. Me too. But I also think that that's one of the things about small business that I love is the human factor is part of it. So if you run a small business, then, it's not a blanket statement. There's always people that are different, but for the most part, you're going to know and understand the people who work for you and with you, and you're going to be cognizant of their life external to work. You're going to be not just aware of it, but supportive of it, letting them go to the basketball. And not just letting them, encouraging. Yeah, of course, be it that, because there are going to be people that are involved in your life, as opposed to if you work at a Fortune 500 company with 32,000 employees, to go to that basketball game, you gotta fill out this form, submit it 2 weeks early, have it approved by 16 Yetis, and it's just there's the human is taken out of it, and it's just because it has to be at that level, at that size. Where now whatever it is, whether it's a personal request or the need for a new stapler, it's just something that gets filed through a system. Where I think that's unfortunate. It's a reality, but there's some downsides to that efficiency in losing that human thing. And I think that's a good thing that small business gives is community, because you understand and you understand who they are as people, not just who they are as employees. It's not just the 40 hours.
Yeah, and it goes beyond the employees too. I said before that we had a really relationship-based business, and so it extends to pretty much everybody that we work with. When we find good people, we're very loyal, and the more you work with people, the more you tend to find out, more about their personal lives. And, I have some activities on the side, and one of them is playing in a local dad band. And, our interior designers come to a few of the dad band shows that we've done.
That's awesome.
And I've been to my architectural designer's house for a birthday celebration at his house. And, so there's stuff like that where you're developing community sort of even outside of your immediate staff. And, it's just great to have that network and that human interaction, because one of the things that drove my wife crazy about working in a small company is that there's not a lot of human interaction. There's not a lot of people to talk to. Mm-hmm. Yes, you can build teams, but it's not like building a team of your own, dozen staff members or something. It's done on a little different level. And so if you are really looking for that kind of human interaction, it's there, but you just have to develop it in your outside relationships.
Right, for sure. And I see that in my life too, where I don't have a office bustling with 500 people that you're going to have lunch with, and that's not your day to day. You're going to have to go see people, but you do. And your immediate team, and then your clients, and some of the people we bring on board, contractors as well. All of that starts to be your team. But that's what I was getting at, is that becomes ingrained in your life, because now they're coming to see your dad band play, or you're going to a party at their house. And now it's not just work, it's external to work, and it's personal, and it's part of your life. And it goes back to that whole fabric and community, where I think that it goes a long way, and it provides I mean, it really depends what you're interested in as a person, but for me, it provides that fabric that I like in relationships where it's not one-sided. It becomes more than that over time.
Yeah. And, you mentioned the clients and, there's a number of clients that we've done sort of a project a year for 6 or 7 or 8 years. And so, you really develop a relationship with them, and I think of them as friends as much as clients, and you watch their kids grow up, and if they're in the same community as you can talk about if you've been through some of the similar child rearing stages that they're in or whatever. You can say how that was for you, and there's a lot of bonding and advice and collaboration just on like getting through the day that happens with your clients. And so that's a really fun part too, but there's also for me, a small company, right now we're 6 people. There's a lot of alone time too, a lot of quiet time, and there's a lot of time when I just have to buckle down and it's like, all right, I have to go do that estimate, and I'm going to do that by myself, and I have to think through this project and figure out what it's going to take to get it done. And there's a lot of just time where you just sort of have to buckle down and know that, what's supposed to be happening out there in the workplace is happening. Trust the people that you're delegating to do what they need to do, and then you do what you have to do to keep it all going. And really, that's a whole nother level of accountability, just my accountability to my employees to stay ahead of them and keep this train on the tracks.
Yeah, keep it going along. What's the dad band called?
Food Baby.
Food Baby. How often do you guys play?
Well, we get together a couple times a month and play in my friend's studio basement. But we've played out a number of times. Most recently, we played at the Christmas version of Earful, which is a program that happens in Watertown. It's called Cheerful, and we did a couple of holiday related songs for that. Was sort of the theme of the evening. But it was a lot of fun, and it was pretty well attended venue, and we got people dancing. So
nice. What do you play?
I sing for the group, and I play guitar and keyboards. I classically trained flautist, so
I did not
could do
know that.
A little Ian Anderson here or there or whatever. But we play covers and whatever our latest favorite song is. But we also we've written about maybe just shy of 20 songs between us, and so we're supposed to be releasing a recording of those.
Wow,
that's this cool. Becomes a shameless plug for
that's fun
for
though.
Food Baby. Yeah.
That's awesome. So Food Baby is going to be releasing its first feature-length album?
EP, yes.
Yeah, that's awesome. You going to do any videos to go along with it?
Oh, no doubt. There's nothing better than seeing a bunch of
getting your YouTube channel going. Yeah. You mentioned you have other hobbies. What else? What other hobbies do you have outside of work?
Well, I mentioned the fishing thing. I love to get out and go fishing.
What kind of fishing you like to do?
Oh, I do fly fishing, and mostly lake fly fishing. So dragging around in a boat is a favorite thing of mine, and I don't love crawling around in a stream or something. I'd rather sit and be comfortable and cover a lot of water and try to scare up some trout or salmon, but I'll take a bass if it happens. My kids are now out of school and sort of on their own, and so that's given my wife and I a little more time to travel, and so that's been something that we've been trying to do when we can. I play tennis to stay active. Just was fortunate to join a local club, and so it's close by, and get out there as much as I can to move things around.
Did you always have hobbies?
I would say that I did. when I first started my business, there was so much work to do that I don't know that there was as much time then for hobbies. And I sort of circled back to the music thing. We raised our kids in a local Unitarian church, and one of the things that drew us there was that there was an annual musical for the kids, and we just thought that was great exposure for them, and it was sort of used as what do they call it, the monkey's paw, to draw people in, right? And we've come to love the church, and the church has a lot of music going on in it, and I saw a lot of people doing that and enjoying it, and thought, I used to do that. I should get back to that. And so, and my mother became a percussionist, and it was like, well,
is she in Food Baby?
No, we should have her do a guest appearance, I think, though, right? That'll be on the second EP.
Right. That's coming.
But my oldest son took guitar lessons. We gave him a guitar when he turned 12 because he was very musically inclined, and he learned how to play the guitar quite easily, and so I was jealous of him and decided that I should learn also. What I learned is I don't have as much natural talent as he does, but I did learn how to do that, and I had played keyboards when I was a kid as well, so that was pretty easy to transition into.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's good to have hobbies. I never did early on. It was more, not as work or whatever excuse, but now I have a lot of hobbies, and I make sure to have time that's not work. When I find too, all of my hobbies help me get work done. They help me like compartmentalize thoughts, or I come to realizations or decisions or things when I'm doing other things than focusing on work, related to work or related to home or related to, whatever it might be. But when you get something like a tennis match and you're focused on it, because if you're not focused, you're going to miss the ball. It seems like it has an odd way of doing some closet cleaning in the head while you have that singular focus. At least it does for me.
Yeah, no, and it's a different kind of focus, but it's still focus. And I think, that's probably one of the underlying fundamentals of all of this, is that you have to be focused in order to succeed and move things along. But right. I mean, especially with the music, it's a completely different kind of focus. And I think, it physically feels like it uses a different part of your brain, but having that escape from the kind of focus you need to run the business day to day or play tennis or whatever, having those different forms of focus definitely provides some relief.
It does. And it just feels welcome. It feels good to go do something else that's not related and can give you that level of focus. We're over an hour and 15 minutes already, so I want to be cognizant of your time, but I have one more question if you have a few minutes.
I've learned so much about you in this conversation. It's been great.
I have one more question. You mentioned that your kids are off to the next stage of life now. So has it been another 5-year segment, and are you now reinventing yourself and in the business? Is there another stage, or have you already landed and you are where you want to be?
Well, that's an interesting question, and the answer changes frequently. But, I just turned 60, and I'm starting to think about, what does the end game look like? And I should probably already have an answer to that, but I don't. And yeah, so it's been a 5-year cycle since my oldest graduated from college, but it's only recently that my second graduated, since they're 5 years apart. And my youngest is actually working in the company right now. He's local, and it provides him with something to do. I don't know if he sees himself as having a future in the company or not. But I do need to start to think about what happens after. In my mind, I'm doing this for another 10 years, and then it could be time to either stop or at least taper it down significantly. And after having spent sort of 34 years on the journey and 24 years actively trying to create something and build something. When we were growing the company, I definitely had the intention of building something that would be transferable to someone else. You know, and then 2008 happened, and I wasn't sure anybody would want what I had.
Yeah.
But it's been interesting because having gone through that process and then now having to, I mean, for a while I didn't have the heart to rebuild the company. It's like I did that. I don't need to do it again. I'm just going to sort of maintain a lifestyle business and keep it small and keep it simple. But then last year, again, by sort of the whims of fate, we more than doubled our revenue from what we had done the year before. And I had no choice but to either reject the work or build the company back up and institute a lot of those processes and procedures we had in place when the company was larger.
Yeah. Good problem to have.
Yeah, they were all there. We could dust them off and clean them up and refresh them and put them back in place. And so we survived that, which, I mean, is probably enough to kill some companies to realize that kind of growth shock. But so I'm not quite sure where it's going to go. And I think, once again, I'll reach out for some help on that as to what it makes sense to do, what my options are, and where it goes from here. But I sort of see it, the next stage as being setting up that transfer and or figuring out what it means to wind it down.
Yeah, probably depending what you want to do, right? So if you want to wind it down, then your options are going to be different. Maybe succession, but you got to find out if your kids are into it, versus selling, which you wouldn't be able to wind it down. It'd just be out of your hands at that point. So you got to figure out what's going to work for you before you can figure out what you're going to do with the company, huh?
Yeah. And I think, sometimes you sell it or transfer it to someone else, but it comes with the contingency that you're involved for, sometimes an indefinite period of time until you're really able to transfer the knowledge. And I think I would want to do that to try to ensure the success of the thing ongoing. Mm-hmm. I think that's an essential part of it. I don't think I could just hand this to somebody and say, you're now going to intuit everything that I've learned in 34 years of doing this. We'll have to work together for a while so that some of it rubs off.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and that's what I would be looking for if I were the person acquiring the business, is some of that knowledge that comes along with it. What was I just going to ask? It just flew out of my head.
You probably wanted to know how much I wanted to sell the company to you.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. For sure.
I have a number. I'll slide it across the table.
It is a dramatic glass table that make for a good effect. So over all these years, is there one thing that you could, if I were to ask you what's a thing you didn't expect about running a business? What was an aha sort of thing? What would that be that has hit you over the years? When you started it, when you hung the sign out and started the business, what did you not expect to understand or to come to know or to have as a challenge or a surprise or a benefit?
Well, I guess I'm not sure I understood then sort of what a lifestyle it could afford me, because it really has given me the option to either scale up or scale down depending on what was going on in the rest of my life. And it fairly quickly became something that I wanted to stick with because I was independent and I didn't have to take orders from anyone except everyone, right? My clients, my staff, my wife, everybody. But it quickly became a goal that it would sustain, a lifestyle that I wanted. And that wasn't necessarily working 24 hours a day or killing myself for work. I wanted to provide for our family. I wanted to provide an education for them and a good foundation for them to become independent adults. I wanted someday to be able to stop working and continue to eat. But above and beyond that, I didn't have big aspirations, and it really has been a wonderful thing. I've met so many great people. My clients just are some great people. It's allowed me to, I really have developed a business mostly in this very small New England community of, 4 square miles on the map. And most of our work is in that area. So I have, a very short commute. I spend very little time sort of getting from place to place. And so there, it's just been kind of this sweet spot that I sort of feel lucky to have fallen into. Although I know it wasn't quite that simple.
That's one of my favorite things too, is the diversity of our clients and the type of projects that we end up working on. It's so, it's all over the spectrum, and that makes it so interesting to go to work every day. It just keeps it's fresh, and it's not, I can't imagine, I just don't have the brain. It's not a strong enough brain to do the same exact thing every day. I would implode.
Yeah, it's very varied activity. And I say each one of our projects is a prototype, because every client wants something different, and we can never sort of do the same thing twice. We can always pull little elements of things we've done before, but it's never exactly the same.
Us too, because it's so varied that there's nothing off the shelf about what we do. Everything is a sort of custom strategic answer to whatever the golden problem is for today, for that client in that industry, in the climate of today, offering up that challenge where it's going to be different in a week. That's what's so fun about it.
Sounds familiar.
I did remember what I wanted to ask you. You said your revenue doubled in the last year. It was a unique problem to have. Did you do anything to spark that change? How did that come to be?
Well, I think, again, I think it has something to do with the maturation of the business in the community, where we just have a reputation, and some people turned to us and liked what they heard about how we were operating. And so there just seemed to be sort of a perfect storm of larger projects that were sort of in our sweet spot of being able to design and build. Externally, there's some factors in that the economy was good, and we have all this growth around us in Cambridge. And so this community is, desirable location to be in. And they're just, a lot of professional people here, housing stock's turning over. One of my fears was that as my kids got out of school and I had less sort of day-to-day contact with people in the community, that I wouldn't have maybe as large a potential client base, and that I might lose touch with the younger generation. And, what I'm finding is our business last year came from a younger generation of new families in the community who found out about us. I think social media helps tremendously with sort of people networking on what's good out there.
Yeah.
And so that's been something that's really helped us, that we've, actively pursued a presence on. But really, I think it was circumstance and dumb luck and a little hard work all mixed into a pot. But it made for a great year.
Perfect. On that note, let's put a cap in this.